The 1950s and 1970s were the prime years of social activism aimed at fighting discrimination and racism against African Americans. The Black Power movement was ultimately a result of the previous civil rights movement, as it helped provide some of the elements that were essential for blacks and whites to gain fuller understanding of each other. While the first era of the civil rights movement aimed at the integration of blacks into white society, the Black Power movement aimed at emphasizing black identity and pride in being black.
Everybody knows that all the people don't have liberties, all the people don't have freedom, all the people don't have justice, and all the people don't have power, so that means none of us do. Provide the leadership to the people's revolution so he can take this country and change it. Turn it upside down and put the last first and the first last, not only for black people, but for all people.
In America, black people are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people, because we're brutalized. The police in our community occupy our area. Our community as a foreign troop occupies territory.
Y'all take off y'all coats. Man, everybody on these balconies as much as y'all want to.
On February 17, 1942, Huey Percy Newton was born to Amelia and Walter Newton of Monroe, Louisiana, who had left the Jim Crow South in the early 1950s in search for a better life in California. He grew up in Oakland in a hardworking, disciplined, religious household which stressed education and dignity. Huey P. Newton's upbringing was supplemented by a blend of traditional black Southern family relations and the newly blossoming social consciousness of the time. From the famous 1955 Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott to the sit-ins of all-white public facilities led by the SNCC activists, the civil rights movement challenged the radical status quo of the U.S. under the nonviolent philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Blacks and whites protested and marched for social and legal freedom. While attending Oakland City College in the early 1960s, Newton was influenced by the works of radical nationalist leaders such as Marx, Che Guevara, and Mao Zedong. It was at Oakland City College where Huey Newton became politically oriented and socially conscious. For the first time, he did not only see injustice around him, but he chose to act. On October 24, 1966, Huey and Bobby Scale founded the Black Panther Party. November of the same year, Newton, Sale, Big Man Howard, the Fortes, and Little Bobby Hutton were the founders of the Black Panther Party Foundation of Self-Defense. The Black Panther Party was a political party of the 1960s which used militant taxes and community service in order to protect and better oppressed communities. They were in charge of patrolling police in Oakland neighborhoods with semi-automatic rifles. This image on top of the drug charges and murder and negative propaganda spread by the FBI made the Black Panther Party and Huey Newton look like violent black supremacists.
Despite his legal run-ins, Newton began to take his education seriously. Although he graduated high school in 1959, Newton barely knew how to read. He became his own teacher, learning to read by himself, and in the mid-1960s, Newton decided to pursue his education at Merritt College, where he met Bobby Seale. The two were briefly involved with political groups at school before they set out to create one of their own. Founded in 1966, they called their group the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Unlike many of the other social and political organizers of the time, they took a militant stance, advocating the ownerships of guns by African Americans, and were often seen brandishing weapons. A famous photograph shows Newton, the group minister of defense, holding a gun in one hand and a spear in the other. The group believed that violence or the threat of violence might be needed to bring about social change. They set forth their political goals in a document called the 10-Point Program, which included better housing, jobs, and education for African Americans. It also called for an end to economic exploitation of black communities. The organization itself was not afraid to punctuate its message with a show of force. For example, to protest a gun bill in 1967, Newton and other members of the Panthers entered the California legislature fully armed. The action was a shocking one that made news across the country, and still Newton emerged as a leading figure in the black militant movement. The Black Panthers wanted to improve lives in black communities and establish social programs to help those in need. They also fought against police brutality in black neighborhoods by mostly white cops. Members of the groups would go to arrest in progress and watch for abuse.
And the police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, to brutalize us and murder us.
Early on, Newton believed that the solution to many of the problems that faced African Americans could be solved by the creation of a separate nation. Newton believed that if African Americans truly wanted to preserve their own culture and be able to determine the course of their lives, the most reasonable solution was to create their own nation, just as the other oppressed people throughout the world had. During this Black nationalist phase, the aims and objective of Newton and the Black Panther Party, and even many of the party's activities, were not much different from those of other Black nationalist movements that arose around the same time. The 10-point plan was comprised of 10 goals that the Black Panther Party sought necessary to achieve equal rights. Ultimately, the 10-point plan illustrated their want for freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our Black community. We believe that Black people will not be free until we are able to determine our destiny. They also wanted full employment for their people. They wanted to end the robbery by the white man of their Black community. They felt that racist government had robbed them and now they were demanding the overdue debt. They also wanted decent housing and education for all people. They wanted Black men to be exempt from military service. They wanted an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people. They also wanted freedom for all Black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. They wanted all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in court by a jury or their peer group or people from their Black communities as defined by the Constitution of the United States. They wanted land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace.
On October 28, 1967, almost exactly a year after the party was formed, violence erupted on the streets of Oakland. In the end, one policeman was dead, with Huey Newton himself charged with the murder. For the police, this event proved the inherent violent and destructive nature of the Panthers. For the Panthers, the event proved the inherent brutality and hatred by which the police operated. In 1968, Newton was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to jail. While in jail, Newton remained as cool as ever. While outside the bars, the party rallied in his support. With his imprisonment, Newton had become a symbol both of the party and for the refusal to submit to any oppressive structure.
While in jail, Huey Newton was only allowed to see one visitor besides his family. This visitor was Herman Blake. He described their meetings as enjoyable and thought-provoking. Newton always exhibited qualities of discipline, dignity, and friendliness, he said. He greeted other inmates and families in a modest and courteous way as he passed them in the visiting room. He was aware of his reputation, and often fellow inmates and their families greeted him, although they were not allowed to engage him in conversation. He always acknowledged them in an exceedingly kind and friendly way. He was modest and courteous with every one of them. He made a special effort to establish eye contact with as many people as possible in the room. He maintained a cool and firm demeanor with the guards, always meeting their eyes but never acknowledging them.
Though the Free Huey campaign was successful in that it made the Black Panther Party a household name, the party's intense association with violence made it a likely target for police, infiltration by the FBI, and violence in the street. The media played a large role in the dissemination of the Panthers' violent image, and often independent parties involved in violence would pose as Panthers, further deteriorating the party. With Newton in jail and Bobby Seale facing his own trial, leadership was given to Eldridge Cleaver, who was increasingly advocated violent confrontations with the police. Soon after taking leadership, he too was involved in a shootout and fled the country, and the party was left with little leadership and waning energy. For many, the party had begun to stray from Newton's original plan of liberation, and only with his return would the party be able to resurface. While Huey had indeed become a symbol of the party while in jail, his time away had left him out of the loop. Nevertheless, he attempted once again to take control of the reins of the party and did so stressing a different agenda than initially. Instead of the main focus on self-defense, Newton promoted community programs such as free meals for children, medical programs, and clothing giveaways. By the mid-1970s, the party had dramatically declined in power, with numerous members in exile or jail, while others left due to ideological differences. The party would never recover its initial glory, and Huey was eventually killed in 1989 over a drug dispute after years of drug use and destructive behavior. Despite its downfall, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense became a lasting, albeit controversial, symbol of revolutionary rage and furor, a victim of an ideology which the end could not escape itself.